Hello and welcome everyone to our Converged Interconnect Network EMEA Summit. My name is Lance McCall, the Global Campaign Manager here at Ribbon, and I'm so glad all of you could join us today for this session. We're going to get started in just a moment, but I did want to point out the Ask a Question box on the bottom right of your control panel. Please ask us any questions you may have today. We really love to hear from you. We have some people standing by to answer your questions there, so please take advantage of that. In addition, on that same panel, you should see a little raise your hand feature. So should you want to ask a verbal question during any part of the presentation today, click that button and I'll get an alert that somebody wants to raise their hand and speak. We'd love for this to be conversational and interactive, so I'll be monitoring that, and please also take advantage of that feature as well. That's really all I have for now. I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to Andreas Hagarts to get us started. Andreas is Ribbon's VP for our IP Optical Center of Excellence. Andreas, do we have you?
Many thanks for the introduction. Welcome everyone to our webinar. And before I introduce the speakers to you, just a brief word about what we'll be covering during the next 1 hour, 1.5 hours. So you as cable operators, you are always in the center of the action since many years because cable operators always have very powerful networks. So it was relatively easy to a point to cope with the higher capacity of BEAD for video services, for broadband, for home customers, but also of course for business customers. But even with those very powerful networks, there need to be some advancements because more services are being looked for, and also capacity increases. It continues to increase, but it's increasing more than ever. So and here we come to CIN, the Converged Interconnect Network, which is an ideal platform to converge broadband business and cable delivery networks, not only to deliver the services which have traditionally been delivered by cable operators in a smoother and faster way, but also to expand the service offering and go to things like 5G XGS-PON, ultra-low latency connectivity, etc., or also support online gaming, which has become a very hot topic. So all in all, it's a good time, and we'll like to use the opportunity to introduce you to our take on the Converged Interconnect Network. And so I'd like to introduce some of the key speakers here. When my little pitch here is over, I'll hand over to Mr. Alan Breznick. He is the cable video practice leader at the well-known Analyst House Heavy Reading. And he will cover, of course, a wider view of the from an analyst perspective of the cable market. Then he will hand over to Mr. Marco Correia. Well, I got it right the second time, so thank you. He's working at one of our customers at Mighty Liberty Global, and he will looking at CIN from a customer perspective, which of course is a extremely important idea, but that's the most important perspective. And last but not least, dear colleagues of mine, so Amos Cohen, who is the head of the Central East Europe and Global Accounts Business Unit. So he is also responsible for Liberty Global. And last but not least, Mr. David Stokes. He is the head of IP Solution and Portfolio Marketing here located in Europe. And I also have other Ribbon colleagues here on the call. For example, my boss, Steve McCaffrey, he is running the Ribbon business for the international region consisting of EMEA and APAC. And again, last but not least, Christian Erbe, he is running sales for continental Europe, where of course a number of important customers, cable customers, are located. So I wish you a very interesting hour or so, and I'd like to hand over to Alan. Please.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Andreas. Hi, everyone. As Andreas mentioned, my name is Alan Breznick. I'm the cable video practice leader for Light Reading and the contributing analyst at Heavy Reading, which is a research arm of Light Reading. Based outside Toronto in Canada, I specialize in the cable, video, and broadband technology markets. Okay, so I have a lot of slides to present, but I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. First, let's start by looking at what kind of impact the COVID-19 pandemic has had on cable broadband networks over the past 20 months. So, move on to this provider slide. As you can hopefully see from this graph from the NCTA in the U.S., between March 2020 and July 2021, NCTA noted the market performance, tracked the performance of cable broadband networks, and reported this data as the COVID-19 Internet dashboard based on information that they received both from North American and European operators, as well as a couple of Asian operators. But as you can see here, peak downstream traffic rose as much as 35% over the period before settling in at about 25% higher than before COVID. Meanwhile, peak upstream traffic shot up nearly as much as 60% before settling in between 45 and 50% higher than in pre-COVID days. So both downstream and upstream traffic soared, particularly upstream traffic, as we'll see on this next slide here, which hopefully will come up in a second. Here we go. Okay, so here's a graph from a report by OpenVault that's showing just how much cable bandwidth traffic surged in the first months after the pandemic started. This is 2020 figures. As you can see, again, upstream traffic particularly climbed since March 2020 and stayed very elevated throughout the rest of the year. Now, this isn't just aggregate data. As we can see on the next slide, you'll see that this is also various cable operators reported the same kind of data. So here we have some numbers from Vodafone Germany showing how much their traffic surged over the course of 2020. You can see here a 35% increase in the peak value of the download traffic during the lockdown period, and a whopping 230% increase in the peak value of upload traffic during the lockdown period. So once again, both downstream and upstream traffic really surged during the pandemic phase, especially in the first year, and upstream in particular. So let's now look at some of the broadband drivers, the biggest broadband drivers here. Quick note, the first obvious one is the use of premium streaming services that have become only more popular during the pandemic as people have entertained themselves at home. Some notable new players, both in North America and in Europe, include HBO Max, Disney Plus, Peacock from NBC Universal, and Paramount Plus from Viacom CBS. But there have been other drivers as well. The other drivers include online gaming, particularly with respect to big game players, big game downloads, and teleconferencing. AR and VR are still trying to live up to their hype, but will likely have an impact on overall usage as well as they come into play for low latency. Okay, one more slide about the impact of COVID-19 on broadband usage. This comes from the FIBRE Broadband Association in the U.S. As you can see, they did a survey of about 2,000 random U.S. Internet users. The first chart shows it's no secret the use of video conferencing has skyrocketed during the pandemic, but this chart illustrates the kind of hockey stick growth that we've seen, broken down by category. Family-related use particularly surged, but there were also healthy increases by business users, for healthcare, and of course for schools and education. Second chart shows a more amplified view, video conferencing among two individual groups, both business and education groups. Again, not a huge surprise, but it does give us an illustrative view of the impact during the period. Okay, so given all this, how did cable respond early on? Marco's going to go into this a bit more during his presentation that follows mine, but I kind of borrowed a couple slides here from Liberty Global to show two of the basic responses that cable operators have made, both in Europe and in North America. First thing is that they've done as much as they can immediately to add more broadband capacity. As a general measure, all capacity in the pipeline was deployed immediately, and the effect was positive. but the headroom utilization only improved slightly. So they did what they could to improve broadband capacity, but there's only limits to how much they could do. Second step, let's see if I get that slide up there, is to reduce the impact of the traffic. Various ways of doing that by expanding spectrum if they can, by splitting nodes if they could, by adding more capacity, reducing bit rates, avoiding simultaneous game releases or updates, and trying to get their customers to avoid usage during the peak hours. Marco, I see your hand up. Did you want to add something on this one? Okay.
All good, all good. I think you captured very well, and this is very good information to share with everyone.
Okay, great. And I know you're going to go into more during your presentation, so this is just kind of a tease to give a sense of what's coming up. Now let's get into cable's long-term strategy. This slide here will sum up the things that cable has been looking to do. First, is boosting existing capacity on its hybrid fiber coax network. Second, operators have been looking to pull fiber deeper and split more fiber nodes. Third, they're looking to upgrade upstream capacity in particular through the use of both mid-splits and high splits. We're seeing a lot of trials starting up both in the States and in Europe with mid-splits and high splits to expand upstream capacity. And finally, not finally, but another thing they're doing is they're prepping the plant for DOCSIS 4 upgrade, more in the U.S. than in Europe. In Europe, more operators looking to go all fiber or at least deeper fiber. And they're also employing new AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning techniques to increase the efficiency of their network. And finally, they're looking to leverage the benefits of edge computing. We'll get into a lot of this more a little bit later, but there's also network virtualization. There's a bunch of other steps that cable operators are going to start trying to take that we'll get into later on during our discussion. Let's get into some of the details. One of the big things is moving up to DOCSIS 4.0. This slide, also from Vodafone Germany, shows the evolutionary leaps of DOCSIS and how much more capacity each new variation of the specs brings to us. It shows how through a fiber, and so now let's get a little bit more into the details of DOCSIS 4.0. As you can see here from the slide, as I build the slides here, DOCSIS 4.0 supports multi-gigabit speeds and support for symmetrical services. It will allow for 10 gigabit per second downstream and up to 6 gigabit per second upstream speeds. It will provide support for low latency applications. It will also provide enhanced security. So I'm building my way through the build here. And there are two different approaches to DOCSIS, for DOCSIS 3.0, 4.0, which operators are deciding on right now. There's full duplex DOCSIS, which mostly Comcast in the U.S. is exploring right now and very gung-ho about. And then there's extended spectrum DOCSIS, which seems to be the more popular option. Full duplex involves using the same bandwidth for both upstream and downstream traffic using something called echo cancellation technology. And extended spectrum means extending the planned spectrum from the current 1.2 gigahertz limit to 1.8 gigahertz and beyond. As you can see here, this ties into a bigger initiative that's going on in the cable world called 10G, which we'll get into in a little bit more detail with this slide. Okay, so speaking of 10G, here's the logo for it. This is something that was introduced at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, almost 2 years ago now, almost 3 years ago now, in January 2019. As you can see, well, no one would really say this out loud. This is really cable's way of responding to mobile 5G push, even though the 10G here doesn't stand for the same thing as the 5G does in mobile. But in general, 10G is an access network agnostic approach that includes support for hybrid fiber coax, for HFC, for fiber to the premise, and even wireless networks. And the idea is to pursue symmetrical speeds of 10 gigabits per second or more, along with enhanced security and lower latency. Okay, which is some of the landmarks that we're seeing with DOCSIS 4.0. So DOCSIS 4.0 is part of the broader 10G initiative that cable is pushing, a very key part, but not the only part. What we've been seeing with DOCSIS 4.0 is starting to see some trials, both in Europe and in the States with that. We had MediaCom conducting a 10G smart home demo in Iowa a couple of years ago. We've had Comcast testing symmetrical 1.25 gigabit per second speeds in Jacksonville, Florida. We've had Virgin Media earlier this year trialing symmetrical 2.2 gigabit per second speeds in Southampton and Manchester in the UK. Comcast has been testing 4+ gigabit speed in a dental lab trial. And finally, we've had Vodafone Germany planning DOCSIS 4.0 field trials for later this year, early next. And one last thing that came out of SCT Cable Tech Expo just last month is that Comcast is now looking to start trials of something called the FDX amplifier in 2022. So lots of activity going on with 10G and DOCSIS 4.0 at the same time. Okay, so next slide. So another big initiative that the cable operators are looking to do to increase their bandwidth and respond to COVID and prepare for the post-COVID world is getting into a distributed access architecture. As you can see, what distributed access architecture, or DAA, does is that it moves the network intelligence from the cable head end deeper into the access network to the node itself. And then by that way, they can expand capacity, they can increase their efficiency, and hopefully move more power to the network and away from the head end, and also reduce the space requirements that they have. So as we can see in this next slide, the European and Middle Eastern market has been increasingly embracing DAA. It got off to a rough start. It took a while. But as you can see from these forecast slides from one of my fellow analysts, Jeff Hayman, who's at the Valero Group, what he's forecasting is slower but wider growth for DAA in EMEA than in North America. DOCSIS 3.1 upgrades and signal improvement are still the major drivers behind distributed access. The pandemic shifted the focus to solving immediate bandwidth and capacity challenges, but now things are shifting to more longer-term considerations, which is why the forecast shows the numbers are starting to really go up as we hit into the mid-20s, and it shows a longer-term moves to high split will drive new DAA modes for more operators. This is a slide showing what Vodafone Germany is doing. It comes from Vodafone's presentation that they did during our Cable Next Gen Europe conference in June. As you can see, that's what a lot of operators are doing, is that they're pushing fiber deeper in the networks. In the States, it's called fiber deep. Here it's more called fiberization. But the whole idea is to bring more and more fiber into the network, and less coax. More and more fiber gives you more capacity, allows for fewer amplifiers, and allows you to have great efficiency, and of course, higher speed. I didn't finish the build yet. Okay, that's the full build on that slide. Okay, I continue racing through things here because I want to get to our key speakers. Here's a key data point from an annual survey in the cable industry that we conduct with SCTE each year in North America, Europe, and elsewhere. In this question, we asked operators about their plans to converge services over a common converged interconnect network, or CIN, as Ribbon was talking about earlier. As you can see, the overwhelming majority of operators, are more than 87%, are planning to converge at least 2 services over a CIN infrastructure. More than half, or nearly 55%, plan to converge at least 3 services over a CIN, and a solid 1/3 are planning to converge 4 or more services over a CIN. So clearly, a CIN plays a key role in what cable operators are looking to do as they try to increase their capacity and boost their efficiency. Another new technology that we've been studying, which we did with a key data point from another survey of operators that was just completed over the summer. This question asked operators about their edge computing plans. As you can see here, most operators are clearly at least exploring the potential of edge compute, and nearly 2/5, or 38%, are now evaluating technologies and vendors, while more than 1/4, or 28%, are exploring use cases and architectural requirements. So clearly edge computing is on the cable roadmap. It'll be interesting to see how far cable goes with it and how a cable ends up deploying it, but it's clearly something that cable operators are looking to do as they look towards the future. One more question from that survey, we asked operators what they view as the top use cases in edge computing. As this graph shows, video streaming content clearly emerged as the top use case, drawing votes from more than 3/5, or 62% of the respondents. 5G mobile services came in a strong second, earning support from 57% of participants. And AR/VR rounded out the top 3, barely edging out video and gaming. Or probably just video gaming, if we phrase that a little funny. Yeah. So as you can see, cable operators are trying out a lot of different new technologies, are exploring a lot of different things. We're going to see a lot of innovations over the rest of this decade between DAA, DOCSIS 4.0, high splits, mid splits, edge computing, and so on, and network virtualization and other things. But of course, challenges still remain, and that would be a whole other webinar to go through all the challenges cable operators face as they go through the next decade. But let's just look at a couple of key ones right here. Here's another slide from Jeff Hainan at the Laurel Group, which sums up well how fiber competition is heating up. As you can see here, more large tech telcos are shifting their CAPEX towards fiber VDSL. Port shipments are dropping quickly. Towards fiber. VDSL shipments, port shipments are dropping quickly as telcos make the shift from copper to fiber. The window is also open for telcos and ISPs to invest more and to invest now and take share in residential and business markets. We're seeing this across all over the world, but particularly we're seeing it in both Europe and North America as fiber providers step up their game. And we expect to see particularly more in North America, in the U.S. right now, as the big federal infrastructure bill finally looks like it's going to pass, which has a lot more funding for broadband. As part of that survey that we just conducted of cable operators about edge computing, we asked them what the most significant challenges is for supporting edge computing. As you can see here, the biggest challenge is availability, knowing when and where to adjust network resources. And even 2/5, or 40% of respondents chose that. So clearly, big challenge as cable operators look to get into edge computing. So to sum things up, EMEA cable operators are now at a crossroads. DOCSIS 3.1 with DAA and increasing high splits will be the focus through at least 2023. This again is some slides I'm sharing from Jeff Hainan and Laurel Group. The DOCSIS 4.0 is still a few years off for most European operators due to the latest shift to DOCSIS 3.1, which is just becoming universal throughout Europe now. So Europe will trail the US and Canada in deploying DOCSIS 4.0, but it will be deployed by a sizable number of European operators in the end. But increasing fiber competition will force cable operators to make strategic choices sooner than they want to do so. And the choices they will have to make are whether to expand their network from 860 megahertz to 1.2 gigahertz and beyond, to ride out DOCSIS 3.1 with fiber deep until DOCSIS 4 becomes absolutely necessary, or until they decide to go fiber to the premise. Another choice that they'll have to make is whether to begin prepping networks for DOCSIS 4 in the next year with tap and amplifier upgrade, or whether it makes more sense to build now, to bite the bullet now, and begin to switch to fiber to the home, as operators like Altice is doing in Portugal and Spain and Israel. So lots of interesting things are going to be happening over the next few years. The industry is clearly at a crossroads as it decides whether to invest more heavily in cable technology or whether to make the switch over to fiber. It's also a big decision as to how much the cable industry wants to invest in wireless technology and get involved in fixed wireless, which we didn't really get into here, but once again, that could be a whole other webinar. But I will leave you with this for now. Feel free to ask some questions later on. And right now, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, which is Marco Correia from Liberty Global. So, Marco, thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, Alan, super. You brought all the context I needed for my presentation. I also just have a couple of slides that I believe will emphasize most of the things that you just discussed. Yes, we are at the crossroads. We're going to have to do something about it, and we are actively working on it. I can also say that looking at Europe and how the geography looks like in the fragmentation in Europe, I don't think one solution is going to fit all. It's going to be a mix of all these solutions. I think we are in a good shape. We have in our team we say we have a term, or we have an acronym. We say we are FIDICOVI, which is fiberize, digitize, converge, and virtualize. So and we base all of our work in this under these premises. So thank you, Alan.
Sure, will give us plenty to talk about, Marco.
I hope so. Okay, let's see if this is working. I believe we can go to the first slide. Hold on, Alan. Our lens. It's not. There we go. So up. Here we go. So first slide I bring you today is about our HFC network, because this is where we start. This is the starting point. We are a cable operator, and we basically have an hybrid fiber coax network, which means that we use fiber. We already use fiber to provide connectivity between our hub sites and the fiber nodes that are typically installed on the field in street cabinets. The distribution to the customers is done using coaxial cables. I know maybe I'm repeating what most of the people know here, but just to provide a little bit more background. But the result of this mixed network is that we have a network, and our fiber network to the nodes is basically an analog optical connection. In this analog optical connection, of course, we have some challenges when we compare it to an optical digital transmission. So analog optical, we need more power, we need more rack space, and our transmission distance is also more limited. So I think everybody can agree that analog optical is not the most effective way of providing connectivity, but indeed it brought us where we are today. And the reality is that today we have an extensive network of hubs, and I would even dare to say that we have a fiber-rich network. But when we look into the future, of course, we need to put ourselves where we are today, and basically we always, with every architecture that we do, there are a couple of key points in our mind, which is how do we reduce our current power consumption? How do we reduce the hardware size, trying to shrink everything and to use real estate is expensive. And when we look, for example, the center of London or Zurich, each square meter is very expensive. So the smaller the hardware is, the better position we're going to be. And third point is how do we break our current distance limitations? How do we get further from where we are today? So next slide. Oh, here we are. So, and sorry guys, I'm already moving more than I should have. Here we are. So I would say that the first point that we would touch, or the enabler, the first building block for digitization, of course, is Remote PHY. So with Remote PHY, we are provided really with this first building block to start transforming the HFC network. For those who do not know what Remote PHY, so Remote PHY is a technology that will basically disaggregate the PHY function. So our layer one in the OSI model, we are moving it from the CCAP to a Remote PHY device. At Liberty Global, we decided and we're currently installing the RPD inside of a fiber node, meaning that we are really pushing that PHY function as deep as we can in the network. And pushing the PHY to the fiber node locations basically opened up the possibility to digitize most of our existing analog links. We can digitize those links very deep in the network. Remote PHY also brings us some additional benefits, because basically we can start to reduce the kit that we are installing in the hubs. We can get rid of all the RPM and the FPMs that we use to combine narrowcast and broadcast. But it also means that we can now double the distance from our CCAP to the cable modem. And we basically are providing right now this guidance of 130 kilometers, not because it is a technology limitation. Instead, it's a limitation we are giving to try to maintain and keep latency as low as we can. So, and now another building block in our available toolbox, or in our toolbox. So with XGS-PON, our effort here is we're trying to grow the F in HFC. So coax should start to shrink and the fiber should increase. So at Liberty Global, we have been building fiber to the home for some years now. This is not new, but we have been doing it using RFOG, so RF over glass. RF over glass is a DOCSIS-based technology, as you are surely aware. It's a great technology, but also comes with some complexity. But in my team, we always love a good challenge, and we see in every challenge an opportunity to do these things smarter and better. And with that in mind, when we started looking at different ways to provide fiber, FTTH connectivity, fiber to the home, fiber to the premise, whatever we want to call it, but really bringing fiber into our customers' premises. So when we analyzed different options, we decided to follow the XGS-PON route. For some years we were on the EPON track, but we decided that because of most of the operators are implementing XGS-PON, the IT systems, the backend needs to be reviewed. So we need to rebuild our IT stack. So doing EPON was not going to bring us the benefits we for some years we thought it would bring us. So we decided to go for XGS-PON. With XGS-PON, we also have a very solid roadmap. We can already see it up to 50 gigabit and even beyond 50 gigabit. Okay? We have the ability to deliver symmetrical speeds and low latency at the most optimized power and space available right now. And as we saw, upstream is during COVID, upstream started to have more relevance. So we are really targeting to try to provide symmetrical speeds, maybe not everywhere, maybe not to all the customers, but having the ability to do it is much better than not having the ability to do it. With XGS-PON, we also have an easy way of providing, of doing wholesale. Again, we're just providing optionality. We allow our executives to make those decisions. We just make sure that we provide them as many options as they can have to make their decisions. When we look at this diagram, we're still looking at, and we're still seeing some analog fiber there, because we will be doing analog broadcast again in some geographies, not everywhere. But we have also an option to digitize and to use remote PHY to have a digitized link between our hub sites and the street cabinets, and with remote PHY we then can insert the broadcast overlay into the fiber. I think another relevant point for our hardware selection and that we target was this ability to provide the capability to have an OLT that can be installed in a street cabinet. Like I said, we're trying to remove pressure from our hub sites. We're distributing wherever we can and wherever it is viable to do it. and I think we can, everybody will understand why we're doing it, but I will also touch this point a little bit further on my presentation. So, let's see if this moves slides. Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to avoid going too quick. There we are. So, mobile backhaul. Now, as Alan correctly mentioned, some operators want to converge B2C, B2C, different service, B2C, B2B, different services, so mobile, fixed connectivity. Yeah, our belief is that we want to converge as much as we can. Maybe we cannot do everything on day one. There's a lot of complexity, not only on the technical part, but I believe most of the complexity comes from the way companies are organized today and how different teams manage the different services. But we get here to mobile backhaul. So at Liberty Global, we are a promoter and we are an enabler of fixed mobile converged national champions. Okay? We either create joint ventures, we sell where we have to sell, like we did in Germany. And sorry guys, let me just see one thing. Sorry, I'm using an hotspot and I thought I was running out of battery. Apologies for this. So we create fixed mobile converged national champions, and we're always supporting this. And our CIN, of course, needs to support this strategy. Okay, so we have been highly engaged and involved with our mobile partners to be able to provide solutions for mobile backhaul, but we're also trying to ensure that the platforms where we are installing are ready for any haul. Okay, so we can be doing backhaul, front haul, mid haul. We need to ensure today that the platforms we are installing can support somehow this XHAul or any haul. Mobile teams, of course, are very interested. We need to provide them with low latency. 10 gigabit ports are a must. Okay, potentially even the 25 gigabit if we start to use CIPRI or eCIPRI. Any-to-any routing is also very important. They need highly accurate network. For most of the cases, we're talking here about 1.5 microseconds accuracy. The network needs to be secure because, like I said, we're trying to distribute. We're trying to distribute as much as we can of our equipment into the outside. So we need security to be part of those that hardware, and we also need. It's critical to that it is that we have operational simplicity in our CIN network. So moving now to CIN. Slide changes. Here we are with CIN. So, of course, CIN now appears as this required and needed converged platform for B2C, B2B, but also for different service platforms. So remote PHY, PON, and mobile for what we already saw. And then there's an entire myriad of B2B services that we also provide. To converge the different services into one platform means that we need to be power efficient, we need to have a reduced footprint and high availability. CIN will be installed in buildings with controlled environment, will be installed in street cabinets. So it's key when we're talking about street cabinet installation that the hardware is shallow depth, so we need it to be as short as or as shallow as we can. Front access is also key. We need temperature hardened equipment. We need quiet equipment because some of this is going to be installed under or in front of somebody's house, under somebody's window. So it needs to be very quiet, and security is also an important component, like I already mentioned. The way we look at CIN, and with CIN introduction, we are removing pressure from our existing upsides. So in how do we do this? So first of all is that by removing kit from an hub site, we're reducing power in two different ways at least. So one is the power required for the hardware, of course, but the second is that the power required for the cool down, we estimate that for each watt that we installed inside of an hub site, we need at least 1.5 watts of cooling capabilities in that same hub. By distributing the hardware into street cabinets, we now can rely much better on passive cooling solutions from the cabinet. So not having active cooling, but doing passive cooling. We believe that we are in a great position to move into these distributed architectures because we have an extensive network of cabinets and fiber. And also our field operations are used to work with these conditions. They are used to work with cabinets. They are used to work. We have a lot of people working and running around every day supporting our existing operations. Now, because this is what I'm trying to bring you guys is also a Nexus network evolution, I could not go without talking about Mustang. And I think we went the slide too far. Here we are. So we could not go without talking about Mustang. So each of the developments that I presented to you before will crystallize into Mustang. Mustang is a concept, business case, use case that our team, the Liberty Global Network Access Architecture team, came up with when we were looking at creating that road, that famous road to 10G. We have two ways of providing 10 gigabit capability or connectivity to our customers. One is the DOCSIS route. The other one is the XGS-PON route. Following DOCSIS route means that we will upgrade our passives, we will upgrade the active RF components. When we look at PON, it's different because we're really talking about a transport medium evolution, transformation from coax to fiber. Of course, it means that, at least in our current strategy, it means that we're laying this fiber, we will be overbuilding most of our network, most of our coax network. Some operators like Virgin Media O2, like VMO2, they have the most suitable conditions to execute this overbuild in a very cost-effective way because they have an extensive duct infrastructure. Okay? It means that with this infrastructure, it means that we can start overlaying fiber in the network, but we do not need to swap all of our customers from DOCSIS to the fiber networks, from the coax network to the fiber network. We can do this connectivity on demand. And we can do this connectivity on demand by simply moving heavy users, for example, if they are filling in the DOCSIS pipe, we can remove them into PON. By that, we are basically extending the lifetime of DOCSIS, okay? So we can provide better speeds and better connections to other customers. Yeah, and this type of network infrastructure upgrade was already announced by VMO2. This was announced last July. VMO2 has quite an aggressive plan to overbuild the existing fiber, the existing coax network with fiber until 2028. And this is for the HFC network. When we are talking, and I already mentioned that we have been doing RFOG. Oh, sorry guys, went another slide too far. Just one back. Let's see if it goes back. Here we are. So the upgrade in the RFOG areas is much. It's more simple. So it follows the same principle. With the advantage that the fiber is already there, we just need to install the OLT in a street cabinet and exchange the existing RONU in a customer premise if we need to change that. So in this case, the network we will have a physical separation between the RFOG and XGS-PON fibers, because there are some colliding or some wavelengths that are used for RFOG are also used for XGS-PON. So we will basically have a physical separation. We can disconnect a part of the network that is active with RFOG, connect it to the OLT, and we can provide both types of connections. So, and with this was my last slide. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Amos, for the invite. Thanks to the Ribbon team. And Alan, you gave me all the context I needed for my presentation. Thank you very much.
Great, Marco. Thanks very much. A quick question for you before we turn to David. How much do you think you'll be depending on XGS-PON, and how much will you be depending on DOCSIS going forward? And how will you balance the two in the network?
Yeah, Alan, I believe there's going to be a transition, and like I said, we keep on investing, and like you also mentioned, we keep on investing on adding capacity to the HFC network. Okay? Mm-hmm. But there, of course, there's a limit, and that limit is given by the available spectrum. Okay, so in these initial years, of course, we're still going to be very focused on continuing to provide additional capacity on HFC. But that transition, and like I said, at least in Virgin Media, will start to happen over the next years. Overbuilding the network to 2028 is very short, but I see us changing, and I see a big benefit, and we're going to start changing. Like I said, heavy users, gaming guys that use gaming really play a lot. Student areas, so it's difficult to give you what's going to be HFC, what's going to be fiber, but we're going to be very tactical about it, and we want to provide fiber everywhere we do not have capacity. This doesn't answer directly to your question, but also these plans are being built as we speak even.
Sure, fascinating stuff. It's going to give us plenty to talk about over the rest of the decade. Thanks.
Right. Thank you.
So I think I'm turning things over now to David Stokes and Amos Cohen from Ribbon. David?
Exactly. And before you guys get started, David, I just want to remind the audience to feel free to raise that hand, ask your questions, use that ask a question feature to chat us your questions as well. We'd love to hear from you. Go ahead, David.
Okay, Lance, are you taking control for the slides? Perfect. Welcome, everybody, and we're just going to do a very quick whistle through the Ribbon strategy on this. So when Ribbon first looked at producing a CIN solution, we wanted a solution which, of course, unified the analog and the digital network, as both Alan mentioned and also Marco, and also provides a platform which allows seamless, easy evolution to the distributed access architecture, which Alan touched on. But we also wanted this solution to provide a next generation packet aggregation capabilities, and it needed to have simple, flexibility to add high capacity and increase that capacity as and when needed, allowing future headroom for future evolution, and in doing that, being able to locate equipment which frees up equipment rooms closest to the end customer. And we'll touch on why that's important, other than just power savings that Marco mentioned a little bit later. So next slide, Lance. So the sort of architecture that really simplified, the sort of architecture we come together for CIN, we have a scalable platform which it can either is well suited for a street cabinet, or can equally go in a small office environment, so low noise, low power for those type of environments, or can go in a central office type deployment. So the scalability to allow the flexibility, give you flexibility in how you deploy those networks. So what sort of capabilities does that require? So moving to slide 4, Lance. This solution to fit in the street cabinet, and Ribbon has a lot of experience in street cabinet deployment. In the UK, we've deployed 20 or 30,000 nodes in the access network in street cabinets. So we've got a lot of experience in the street cabinet and what's required. So firstly, as Marco mentioned, it's got to be extremely compact form factor, 300 mil deep, front access, right to left airflow, ruggedized with all the temperature requirements that entire and it implies. Those are the bare minimum just to fit in the street cabinet. And we actually have proven our solutions sitting in street cabinets along with our access equipment, for example. So we've got proven street cabinet deployment of these types of solutions. But more than that, when you actually have the low noise type capabilities, that also makes that box very suitable for sitting in a small office location as well and not being disturbing or distracting. So you can start to see the mapping of one use to another. Then of course the solution needs to be modular so it can grow and scale as required. And by modular here, I don't mean modular just in terms of size and capacity, I mean in terms of features and functionality as well. And that way you pay for what you use. We also are very unique within our capabilities to provide what we call dual stack MPLS. So we're able to provide both dynamic and deterministic IP MPLS capabilities. This is really, really important if you're looking to replace the old TDM infrastructure, or you're looking to do some sort of mission critical type services to support some of the utilities, for example. But as we move forwards, many of the new services need deterministic IP performance. And our experience there and the ability to provide both dynamic and deterministic IP is essential as you move the network forward to support these increased number of converged services that Alan touched on. Then of course, you need the ability to support some levels of GPON for PON infill where the access network hasn't completely covered everything that's there. So you've got this multi-access box which can do a bit of GPON as well. And the whole lot has to be merged by an intuitive management system, which allows you to really see what's going on in the network, provision it quickly, and fault find and troubleshoot quickly. So moving to slide 5. With this, as I mentioned right at the start, with this sort of platform, which is next generation packet transport, packet aggregation transform product, this really opens up new revenue opportunities for you. So you can deploy the CIN to converge your analog and digital networks. But once you've got that, you can start to converge other services like Alan mentioned. So for example, you can support low latency services. I've called these under guaranteed performance services, but low latency services for things like online gaming, AR, VR, that Alan mentioned in his survey, but also start to look at the high reliability services that are going to be needed to deliver health type services remotely. I mean, these will initially start with online consultations, etc., but we'll rapidly go into more and more detailed use of that video. And it's got to be secure, they've got to be reliable. And just as a matter of point in the graph, for AR, VR to actually work and not make you sick, you've got to have a latency of less than 15 milliseconds. However, for a truly immersive experience, that's down at about 6 or 7 milliseconds. So very, very low latency. Something slightly different's got to be done, and I'll explain what we can do as an MSO and why you're uniquely placed to address that. Then, of course, as Marco mentioned, you've got an ideal network out there to do mobile backhaul, both frontal and the XGS type deployments. There is loads and loads of old TDM equipment out there in the network, the old SDH stuff that you need to retire. That platform ought to be able to retire those services. And for those customers who want to move from someone else's network, you can pick up and grab those services, those old TDM services, and emulate them on this sort of converged platform. And finally, as I mentioned, with GPON, you're able to do PON infill where the fixed access network hasn't quite covered everything that's required. So moving on to slide 6. So MSOs are really, really uniquely placed to address these opportunities. And I'm not just saying this because this is what we're targeting. You've got the infrastructure, you've got the expertise, you've got the scale, and you've got the footprint to really make massive inroads in these markets. And evolving to CIN frees up the equipment rooms I mentioned at the start. What are you going to use those equipment rooms for? You could sell them, make money that way, save power. But alternatively, you could use them to provide to house mobile edge computing resources, to support all the low latency services that are going to evolve. So online cloud gaming needs very low latency. AR, VR needs low latency. You could put MEC resources in these equipment rooms that you've freed up And suddenly you've got an infrastructure there which really allows you to address those markets in a way that most of the service providers cannot do. And the same applies to when you look at fronthaul for mobile backhaul. Again, this is really, really close to the edge of the network, just where the ideal locations in many instances for where you want fronthaul type deployment. And that's what you've got, but you need a platform you put it in the network to do your CIN to be able to do all these other services. So you end up with a super converged edge. And Ribbon solution provides a super converged multi-access edge able to support all of these different services, mobile XGS, TDM replacement, PON infill, etc. So moving to slide 8. So within our portfolio, within the Ribbon portfolio, of course we support IP routing, MPLS, TP, IP MPLS, all the carrier Ethernet type capabilities you want, 1 gig, 10 gig, 25 gig, 100 gig interfaces, all of that there. But as I mentioned, you may want to do a bit of PON infill. We provide pluggables to allow you to achieve that. And so you can just plug PON pluggables into the equipment, and that gives you the PON. And very similarly with when you want to do TDM replacement. You don't need to touch the network, you don't need to pay for it, you don't need to deploy it. When you've got some customers where you want to do TDM to IP migration, insert the pluggable, you're able to then do that. So it really makes that edge network very, very flexible and very, very modular, allowing you to grow as you need to grow when you need to grow. So moving to the next slide, please, Lance. So a quick overview of our portfolio for providing this super converged edge to support the range of applications on the left-hand side. And this is just the applications I could think of today that are obvious and quite low-hanging fruit, I would suggest. The flexibility and programmable network elements that we're able to provide allow you to be future-proof to allow, as Marco said, provide all the options to his senior management and his marketing and product teams to go with whatever they want to go when it becomes suitable for them. And as new things come down the pipe, you've got a set of platforms that allow you to achieve that. And we're able to achieve this without over-engineering by having modular programmable elements where you only pay for what you need. And that's both capacity, but functionality and features as well. So things like the pluggables, but also only paying for things within the IP routing stack that you require. So looking into the next year or so with Ribbon, we are truly embracing on going forward with NOS type techniques as well. For those that don't know, NOS, it allows us to disaggregate the software from the hardware and then disaggregate the software from itself. But just think about disaggregating the software from the hardware. This continues to increase the flexibility of your edge network, allowing you to react really, really rapidly to changing demands, putting new functionality and features right out there at the edge of the network as and when it's required, and using best-in-class hardware, driving down costs and using product innovation in the hardware to really, really meet the needs as the network moves forward. So really, at the heart of the solution that we believe is required for you when you deploy CIN is that this flexible economic solution to allow you to move whatever you want with the edge of the network. So in summary, if we move to the final slide there, Lance. So in summary, we at Ribbon believe that your CIN network should provide you with, as I've mentioned a few times, a super converged multi-access edge able to address multiple service types that you know today, but also those new ones that come down the pipes that we maybe aren't quite aware of at the moment. You've got to have a proven IP capabilities. All of this, all the services you get are based around IP. You've got to be able to transfer the data in a way that you understand, that makes sense, that meets the service demands. So the demands of online cloud gaming are very different to best effort broadband. They just are. And you don't want to over-engineer a network for best effort broadband so that it all meets the low latency requirements. You need to have a flexible deployment opportunities there. And that's what I'm getting at right here with the proven IP in different ways for different services. Street cabinets are an incredibly valuable resource and out there. The deployments must be able to go in street cabinets and must be architected to do so. You can't take a rack-mounted box that's designed for being rack mounted and just shove it in a street cabinet and expect it to work, because it won't. And then, as I mentioned, to keep the economics sensible and suitable, it's going to be scalar and modular, and be proven to support the sort of services you're likely to want to introduce as you go forward. So the key here is we believe that a CIN solution or a CIN platform should be flexible to evolve as new opportunities are identified by you and your product teams. So thank you for listening. Any questions?
Okay, thanks, David. I know you have to run in a second, but let me ask you a quick question. What's the, if you had to boil it down, what would be the first couple steps that operators should take if they're looking to move to a CIN infrastructure?
So I think it comes back to the discussion that Marco had. You've got to decide between whether it's, and you mentioned between DOCSIS 3.1, DOCSIS 4, hybrid fiber coax, fiber deep into the network. Once you've decided that, if you're going to go for a remote PHY type of approach, like Marco said, is then how close to the network can I put the edge, can I put my remote PHY? And if that can be the street cabinet, that is brilliant, because you can really free up so much resource and take that fiber so deep into the network, freeing up so much more space, which is in really, really important locations, and you can reuse for so many things. So for me, that it's about deciding the architecture that you need within the route you want to go. I think that's the key fundamental first step.
Okay, thanks. When we do this again in a year, where do you think the CIN will stand?
Oh, that is a really interesting question. I think COVID's just changed everything. I think we're going to get fiber. I think we're going to go for more remote, deep fiber networks. I think we're going to start to see a lot more of that. I think there's so much pressure to go down that route. I think 5G will have been a year older than it might have been, and we might actually start to see the need for fronthaul networks out there. So there's a business driver then that the cable operators can start providing fronthaul, making money out of fronthaul services, so which also drives fiber deeper into the network.
Okay, great. Looks like Marco wants to get in on this too.
He's talking
Marco,
to you.
Yeah, you're on mute, Marco.
What a mistake. Not like I've been working on virtually for the past year and a half. But yeah, fiber is part of this strategy. Whatever we do, whatever flavor of DOCSIS, the segments are going to be much smaller, and fiber will be organically growing really close to the customers' connection points or household premise. The key in here is that customers is always expensive, and when you do that change from HFC to fiber, that's really where a lot of money. So being able to do it on demand or whenever you decide to do it, that's a powerful tool that I believe any MSO that has that ability to choose that moment is in a great position.
Okay, all right, thanks, Marco. Unfortunately, David had to run. He had another presentation that he involved in, so he sends his regrets that he wasn't able to finish on that question. Let's move on to our next speaker, who is Amos Cohen, also from Ribbon. So Amos, thanks for joining us this afternoon from Israel.
Hi, good afternoon. Actually, David covered all the presentation that we were splitting together. So it's
okay.
Yeah, I think David covered everything there. I saw another question come in, Alan. You might have seen this too, and I think it's a good question. Do you believe that gaming is the potential killer service that's driving the demand for the ultra low latency services? What are your thoughts there?
Definitely. I think it is going to be one of the killer apps. We're seeing that already with Cable Labs is developing low latency DOCSIS, and a big part of the reason why they're doing that is for gamers. They see gaming as a huge application that will use low latency. So I think that is definitely one of the main drivers. That and video streaming and probably various types of business services, and possibly AR and VR. How does everybody else feel about that?
Gaming, from my point of view, gaming for sure, it is a killer app, but what gamers always look for is stability of connection and low latency, not capacity. They do not require those big pipes to be able to play. It's all about stability and low latency.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Very good. We may have one or two more questions here, but, just want another reminder to the audience. Feel free to raise that hand. I can unmute you and you can ask your question directly to the team while we have them here. I saw another one, just kind of a generic question. If you had to name the one big benefit of CIN, what would that be?
I think I can get that one. But I believe it is the ability that we will have to reuse our existing fiber network. Okay, digitizing digitizing links is really the biggest benefit we're going to have, because that allows us to reuse our network and even rethink how our network looks like. Because typically it's a tree and branch network, but we can now start to think how to do it a bit differently.
And I would just add to that the greater efficiency that CIN will allow, because you'll be able to converge multiple services over one infrastructure, which you couldn't do before. So I think that's going to be a huge benefit for operators in the future.
And provide new services.
Right?
Which are limited.
So lots of key benefits.
Yeah, sounds like there's certainly more than one, right?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you guys see out there that we need to address?
Listen, I would just raise another one, and at least David already touched it, but it's critical to mention it again. Hardware in state cabinets needs to be shallow, needs to be silent, needs to be temperature and hardened, needs to be secure, accurate, and available all the time. So, and I think this is really a challenge to companies like Ribbon to outperform in this part, because it's going to be critical to have this equipment distributed into state cabinets.
I had a question for Marco. Marco, if you're up for it.
Go for it.
How much more life do you think DOCSIS has in Europe? We see a lot more interest in DOCSIS 4.0 on the North American side than in the European side. Most operators in Europe are going to go all fiber rather than upgrade to the next level DOCSIS?
Yeah. Alan, very honestly, I'm 40 years old, okay? So it's still a long stretch till I retire. I've worked with fiber most of my life.
Right.
I've worked with fiber most of my life, but I'm going to retire and DOCSIS is still going to be there. What I do think is DOCSIS is like that classical car that we have in our garage. We like to keep it running clean and tight as we can, because it's a piece of art. It's really a piece of art. What we are doing with fiber is really to extend that lifetime. It's to be able just to take that car out of the garage whenever we decide it's a nice day to go and shine in our classical car. So DOCSIS is going to be there for long, and we will be supporting DOCSIS for long, for sure.
Okay, I like that analogy. I'm going to use that in the future. Good, thanks.
Okay. Well, we're a little bit over the hour there, so I think we've probably addressed most of the questions that we had from everyone. I would just like to say thank you, first of all, to everyone for attending today and taking time out of your schedule. As you can see on screen, thank you to all of our presenters today, as well as Andreas and several others that were on the back end helping with some of the questions. We really appreciate you being on and giving us your expertise. More information, ribbon.com, Liberty Global, obviously heavy reading and light reading are great resources on this topic. Feel free to visit those places. You have additional questions that come up later. You can reach out to us on all of these different places. Later in the afternoon or evening, perhaps in the morning, wherever you are, you will be getting an email from me with a link to the replay of today's event, as well as a copy of the slides. So should you have a question at that point, feel free to reply to that email. We'll get your question to the right individual and get that answered for you. So again, just really appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you for joining, and always be on the lookout for emails from Ribbon and our website for additional events like this. We'd love to have your attendance moving forward. Thanks so much, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.